you feeling stuck, lost, tired, or uninspired? We've all been there, including myself. I'm Coach Des, mindset motivator and lifestyle entrepreneur. I'm here to tell you that the best, unapologetic, and limitless version of yourself is yet to come. The Born Unbreakable podcast is here to inspire just that. With motivating guests from all different walks of life and around the world, their stories will empower you to unlock abundance and your unbreakable spirit. Do you need accountability? Reach out to me for a free consultation of how I can support you in reaching your maximum potential. This episode is brought to you by Sherpa Way Marketing. Are you a business looking to gain greater visibility online through search engine optimized content? Maybe you need effective ad campaigns to kickstart or bolster traffic to your website. Sherpa Way Marketing has seasoned experts that are bilingual in English and Spanish. Let them take the guesswork away and enhance your brand positioning with their comprehensive marketing services. Go to SherpaWayMarketing.com. That's SherpaWay marketing.com to schedule your free 45-minute consultation today. Welcome to the Born Unbreakable podcast. I'm your host, Coach Des, and I have a very exciting episode for you. For one, I particularly am in a good mood because it's nearly the weekend for me. And for my guest, it's been like the most extended version of a weekend, which we'll get into here. But today, I have Roger Williams with me, and this may arguably be one of the most inspiring episodes because I don't think I have talked about the subject of a gap year. And we'll talk about what that means if you've never heard those words before. But Roger is a lot of things. He's a writer. He actually podcasts himself, so he knows a thing or two about this world, which I always have an appreciation for because, it's a lot of work. So, I'm always feel good when I'm with a fellow comrade. He's an adventurer, which we'll learn more about today. And this is the most exciting title that Roger has. He's a head crosser offer. Okay, of his bucket list. And so, after 30 years of being in the industry of youth development and teaching, and then quarantine happened, which we've all had the luxury of experiencing. I say that tongue in cheek. Roger actually had experienced 2 heart attacks, which is, I would say, an awakening. More than once. And he decided to embark on an adult gap year and prioritize himself, his relationships, the adventures that he wants to go on. And that's exactly what he's been doing. So he's been traveling, and in his travels and in his experiences, he takes time for opportunities like this to inspire others and talk about this because, I think this is something we maybe all fantasize about somehow, and Roger's actually living it. But I'm really grateful for you taking the time today, Roger, to chat with me. So thank you for being here.
Oh, Coach Des, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that I can bring something positive to your audience.
Yeah, no, this is great. Well, before we talk about the fun stuff and how you got to this gap year and what you're doing, I do want to know more about your background. So obviously, you spent 30 years developing a career, doing what I think many people can relate to, putting your head down, working really hard, doing your best to make an impact. So what did that look like for you?
I worked in the youth development field. So I was a youth pastor. I ran a nonprofit. I became a teacher later on. I did all sorts of things to help young people be successful in life. My final position before I quit to go on this gap year was with a college where I was involved in a TRIO program, which helps high school students that are first generation or low income be successful in high school, get into college, and have the skills to complete college. So that's what I was doing for about the last 5 years, and the last year of that was year and a half of that was during the pandemic. So that's what I was doing before all this stuff happened to me.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean that's such a noble thing for anybody. I mean, particularly during the pandemic, I feel like there's so many parents who assumed some sort of teacher role and they had a newfound appreciation for what teachers are actually doing every day and said, holy crap, this is hard. I didn't sign up for this, because everybody was sort of sharing that responsibility. So whether people signed up for it or not, they were doing a little bit of that over this last, and arguably even today are doing some of that, because we're not really past all of this quite yet.
And that's probably a big chunk of why I made the choices that I did over the last year or so, because in our society, we're taught to learn to find our self-worth in our employment. So wherever I sell my labor, or whoever I sell my labor to, that becomes my self-worth, my identity. And it's worse even for teachers or nurses or people like that, who society says, oh, it's you do a wonderful thing. Like you just said, right? You do a wonderful thing. It's so noble. And you should get so much out of that doing it. And it's like, I did, but at the same time, I'm more than that, right? I'm more than just how I sell my labor and who I sell it to. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to answer that question, what do you do anymore, by saying those things. I wanted to be able to say, I cross things off my bucket list. That's what I wanted to be known for. I might still have a job after this gap year's over, and I might have to go back to the workforce. But what I really want is to be able to say, even then, that what I do is I cross things off my bucket list.
That's freaking awesome, Roger. This is what's hilarious. Okay. When I do my interviews, I always like asking questions at the end that are broader, that give people some perspective. And I do ask the question, what's something on your bucket list? Why do I do that? Because I want people to keep dreaming. I want people to make it a reality, because that's why they call it a bucket list, because they're like, well, you don't get to it until later, before you kick the bucket. That's where the whole terminology came from. And so that's the interesting story behind it. But the truth, and I think that's a great thing for us to talk about today, is it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be when you're like, oh my gosh, the clock is ticking, the little hourglass just turned over and all the sand is about to dissipate, and I only have this much time to get the things that I want in life accomplished.
And for me, it's a much bigger issue, because in our society, we tell people, especially young people, like, your job is to go to school, get good grades so you can go to a nice college, so you can get a nice job, so you can buy stuff. And there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with that model, except that last piece, right? That if all we're ever doing is buying stuff and accumulating things, what gets sacrificed in that is experiences and relationships, really, or the chance to build relationships. And so I try to tell young people as much as I can, take your time, figure out what it is you want to do. What do you want to be known for? Because when you start getting into that money trap of working and having to maintain a job and do all those things that society tells us we need to do, you start losing the ability to do what you just said, right? It winds up being at the end of our lives. Gap year traditionally, in a sense, is for young people who take a year off either between high school and college, or between college and going to work, to kind of find themselves. And it's amazing to me that a lot of people don't know that Harvard has been sending a letter to every admitted incoming freshman every year since 1975, saying, we will hold your acceptance for a year if you want to take a gap year. Gap years are traditionally, very much part of the traditions in Europe and those places. And so it's something in the States we just don't, It's not a rite of passage that we have built into our system. And so for me, my adult gap year isn't necessarily about finding myself, but it's like you talked about. It's like I'm 52 years old, and now I have to make up time for all those years that I sacrificed my time for other things, whether it was family or job or whatever it was. I'm doing this to make up some lost time, so that hopefully I have several more years to go before I kick that bucket, and I won't have to cram it all in one space. But if you can start early in life and kind of make choices in a way that allows you to prioritize experiences and people over things, I think that we'd all be a lot happier in how we live our existence. We'd probably even be better employees, probably too.
Well, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. And you are today where?
I am in Matera, Italy. The best way to describe where Matera is, because not a lot of people know where it is, it's about 45 minutes from the Arch and the Boot at the bottom of Italy. So I'm not on the water, I'm inland. It's very arid and dry. If you've ever seen The Passion by Mel Gibson, or you've seen the latest James Bond movie, you've seen Matera without knowing it. But yeah, so that's where I'm at currently right now, in my 8th week out on I wouldn't say roads, but the plains. So yeah.
That is so cool. And I was thinking about what you said about being happier. When we're leaning into the things that we want to prioritize, that are experiences, relationships, people, those are the things you remember. Interestingly enough, I don't know that your memories are all of the things that you acquired. It's not like you sit there and go, oh my gosh, when I bought this and I bought that. I mean, maybe some people do that. But what you take with you, in terms of having memories that you cherish, maybe that's a better way to say it. You cherish people, you cherished places that you see. I don't know that, you cherish that luggage piece that was $2,000, that was just so cool in that moment that you bought it. So it's all perspective.
Sure.
I think it's perspective. And I think with time and with new experiences, you gain broader perspective. But I'm curious, what are some of the things that you're learning as you've taken this time for yourself?
I've learned that Nutella is really good. I always was afraid of Nutella.
It's delicious.
But Nutella is fantastic. Seriously though, one of the biggest things is that as I've taken on what some would call a bucket list life, right? That I'm prioritizing doing things and having experiences over having possessions. That they're winding up to be a lot of things that I get to experience that weren't even on my bucket list. I've had this strange feeling of like being able to do these certain things that it's just like, oh, I probably should have had that on my bucket list. Now what do I do? Do I put it on there and then cross it off, or just not worry about it? Or, it's that a little bit of a dilemma, but it's not that big of a deal because I get to experience all these really cool things. I was in Northern Italy for a month, and I went to Milan to visit some friends, and I got off the train, and there's this huge banner for a Banksy art exhibit. And I love Banksy's work, and it's for me, it's very inspiring, and I've always wanted to see it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I get to see Banksy's artwork. I had to get a suit for a funeral a couple of weeks ago that I had to run back to the States for. And I got an extremely well-tailored, handcrafted Italian suit that probably should, having a tailor-fitted suit probably should have been on my bucket list. But it wasn't, but I got one. I wound up here in Matera and was walking around the town, and all of a sudden I run into these crawl around the town. If you do this loop, there's these 6 Salvador Dali sculptures just in the middle of this town. And it's just like, he's Spanish. Why does this town have these 6 Salvador Dali, amazing pieces of artwork just randomly here, and I get to see them. So I think it's that ability to, when you open yourself up to how hokey this sounds, but what the universe provides or can provide, that your life becomes a lot more full and you get to experience so much more than even what you planned. I think that's one of the major things. I think the other major thing is learning to stroll. I've come accustomed to loving that word. I walk everywhere. I don't have a car. I usually walk or I'm flying, or riding a train. And so, but walking in these European towns is very normal. Where in the States, we get in our car at our door, we go to the door of wherever we're going, we get out of our car and go into the door. There's no in between. The pace is always seems to be a little bit frantic. But in my time here, it seems like I just get to stroll. And I get to take the time to look at things and see things that if I was going a mile a minute or going door to door from location to location in a car, I never would have seen. I walked by this church the other day, and there's just these skulls carved into the stone on the side of this church that are just incredible and probably hundreds and hundreds of years old. And it's just like, if I was walking fast, from my mindset was I'm getting from point A to point B, I would have missed everything in between. And so I'm learning to love to stroll. It's been a lot of fun.
That's a different mentality. And you could not be more spot on in terms of the functioning of how people are in different, even culturally, because in America, and I'm a consultant, so I travel. For the last 17 years, I've worked in different places. I have an appreciation for all the different parts of our country, but you pretty much are just, you're going. You have a destination. You want to get there. You will hop in an Uber or a rental car. You would like to be very efficient. You want to figure out the least amount of time it's going to take. And on top of that, you are multitasking. If you are not on the phone, sending an email, responding to something, you're not productive. Therefore, you're just trying to fill up your time. So you're missing all kinds of things because you're doing all of this while you're just trying to get to where you want to go. And that's such a big reminder for us about being present and actually enjoying what's around you.
And you can schedule that, right? I mean, I think that's the biggest issue I have with how we operate and function in the West as far as our vacation time and those kind of things. Like before I came on this trip, people were like, "Oh, are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? Are you going to see this? Are you going to see that?" And it's just like, I might. I was in Rome for a day, and I think I walked like 10 miles or something like that in a day. And I just went to all the different, I went to the Duomo, I went to the Colosseum, I went to some of the Trevi Fountain. I went to all the places you're supposed to go. I took selfies and I just kept walking, right? Because those, I knew that those things might be important for people back home to see that I did them. But for me, it's just like, it was hard for me to explain that I'm not trying to be a tourist, right? And I think a lot of times in our mentality in the States, we carry over how we work, just like you were talking about, Des, that we plan every single moment, right? And we pack our itineraries so that we can get that maximum amount of exposure to the things that everybody else thinks we need to see or has told us that we needed to see. And I think that if we can just slow down just a little bit in that process, every piece of paper has margin on it, right? The portion where you don't.
Oh my gosh. There's a reason for that.
You got to learn to use that space, not to cram ourselves so that we can't function, right? Everything is space to be, cramped. But if we can slow down and say, okay, I'm not going to, jam pack this itinerary and I'm going to allow for space. I think that's a huge thing about intentionally traveling. We're hearing that a lot now about intentional travel, and intentional travel doesn't mean you have a full itinerary. It means you're intentionally going someplace to to be in that space and intentionally allowing yourself to, whatever comes at you. And I think that that's something that we need to learn, not just for our vacationing, but even for our work life and all those things. It was one of the things that kept haunting me about when I was after my heart attack. So who am I? What am I doing? What's my life like? Is that we hear all the time from corporations and institutions that we need to have work-life balance. And I'm sorry that's BS. It's a lie. Corporations and institutions do not want us to have work-life balance, right? Because there's no way that the 40 hours or 50 hours I sold you, right, to earn money can equal, after sleep, the 70 to 80 hours I have left in my life. And the reality is that most of the time in our work, that starts to creep into those 70 hours, so 70, 80 hours, whether it's a nurse who's too tired to after a 12-hour shift to even move, that just goes home and collapses on the couch and can't give the attention to her family that she wants to give them, or a teacher who has to bring work home because there's so many demands and there's not enough space in a schedule for a teacher to do the work during those hours. They have to take that home, and that eats into the time. Or just sitting in bed trying to fall asleep and like your brain moving 10,000 times a minute to thinking about what's going to schedule tomorrow. What do you have to deal with in your job tomorrow? And so there is no work-life balance. And what we really need, and if institutions and corporations cared about us as employees and workers and what we provide them and our labor, they would want us to have work-life boundaries, that we would be able to have space to say, okay, I'm done. I sold you my 40. That's, I don't buy a PlayStation or an Xbox and get new games for free. I still have to pay for those games. And the labor force should also be able to say that to their employers, be able to say, okay, look, this is my boundaries, and I'm not going to go past these boundaries, because once we go past these boundaries, I'm going to start becoming an unhappy person. So one of the first things I did when I decided that I was going to change all my socials work statements to be this head crosser off my bucket list, I decided I was going to tackle one of the things that have been in my brain and on my heart for a long time to do, which is the Camino de Santiago, which is a 790-kilometer trek across northern Spain. It usually takes about 30 to 35 days to complete it. And so I went last August, and I did that for 4.5 weeks or so. Met a ton of great people. But when I came home, I had made this Instagram reel, and it was basically just a slideshow of all my selfies that I had taken with everybody that I had met along the way. And I showed it to someone that I had worked with for 4.5 years. And after she was done watching it, she said, the first things that came out of her mouth were, "I've never seen you that happy." And I was super sad, right? I mean, I'm like, yeah, well, I was glad that she saw that I was happy, because I was enjoying myself. I met some amazing people that I'm still friends with today, and intend to be for a long, long time. But I was sad that over 4.5 years, this person had never seen me. This is somebody I liked at work, that we were close friends. We helped each other. We supported each other. And yet she says she'd never seen me that happy. And I decided I don't want anyone to ever meet me and not see that person that she saw in that video. And so that was when I kind of had to make the choice to say, okay, I'm going to take a year off from work. I'm going to dip into my retirement fund, and I'm only going to do things that bring me joy. And so that's kind of where I'm at now.
It's brilliant. It really is, because I think what happens is we compartmentalize, You're in a work setting and you're like, this is work. This is what we do to make a living. But the truth, like you said, with the balance, which is just a misnomer, is we're integrated, dynamic human beings. It's not about little boxes that we move into at different times. When you're being a whole person, fun can be something that is interspersed, whether it's a problem you're solving in the workplace or something that you're enjoying, like a stroll through the streets and appreciating what actually is around you because you're paying attention to it and you're not distracted by other things. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I do think that a lot of what you're describing is a paradigm shift because, and I'd be curious about your perspective and how you might change the conversation with youth today, knowing the kind of conversations you've had for many years of youth that are asking for a roadmap to success. Because really in America, and I can't speak to how this discussion occurs elsewhere, but it is when you say success or you say achievement, there is steps, associated with that. And it is very linear. And that's the reason for the path that is so commonly taken. And it is when you deviate that you're the rebel. Like, oh my gosh, you didn't, go away to college. You didn't go away and get this piece of paper that says you now are capable of doing some other things, so it takes though a big shift to change the narrative and change the conversation with young people so that they can still be good, citizens in the world, but are also living on terms that allow them to be happy human beings, not just productive ones. So, what would you say to, a young person that is 18 today and thinking about how to do life meaningfully?
Yeah. Patience is like the biggest portion, I think, of this equation, is to teach delayed gratification. We don't do that very well in the United States, that you can have whatever you want, whenever you want it, from wherever you want it, pretty much a drop of a hat, and the Amazon can get it to you in 3 to 7 days, right? And so we don't have a lot of delayed gratification being taught. And so what happens, I think, is students get money, get green in their fingers, and they get, addicted to that dopamine that you get when you purchase something, whether it's online or not. And we're definitely in a culture right now where it's okay to charge things and put it on and gain debt so you can have stuff. And so teaching young people that, if you just wait, right? And if you want to buy something, that's awesome. Buy it with cash, right? Make the money, save that money, and buy it with cash. Because you might find after, a couple of months of trying to save for a new pair of Yeezys that you don't want them anymore, and that it's not as important as you thought it was. Fast fashion is just like the craziest thing. My brain can't even fathom, that there are 12 seasons now. When I was a young person in middle school and high school, there were 2 seasons. There was beginning of school year, right? You got new clothes at the beginning of the school year, and you got new clothes beginning of the summer because you had grown, right? There were 2 seasons. Well, now there's 12 seasons. Every month, stores are rotating their product and getting young people especially to say, I need whatever's new. I need whatever's new. And like I said, I'm not going to tell people not to buy things, but learning to live small and paying with cash is like one of the best things you can teach young people, because it puts them in a position, if they learn that skill early, then they can say, okay, do I really want this? Do I really need it? Because I've had to wait, right? It's kind of like me and tattoos, right? I have a rule that I've only broken it once, but I have a rule that, I have to have the money saved to do it. And I have to have thought about it for a while. And there's been a couple that I'm like, nah, I don't really want that, right? I saved the money up and thought about and got something different or whatever. But I typically don't. I've never put a tattoo on a credit card. I've never, except once, had an idea for a tattoo and like gotten it the next day. I've only done that one time in 26 years that I've been tattooing myself or getting tattoos that I've done that. And there's something about that process that forces you to like think about the purchase, right? We don't, they used to call the gum rack by the checkout counter in the grocery store, the point of purchase sales, right? You can buy things, and everything's a point of purchase sale right now. Instagram's a point of purchase.
Are you kidding me? All the darn ads they put on there. You're going on there. Next thing you know, you walk away with like, how did I just spend $150 on this thing that I didn't need? Because it's just advertised right there. I mean, that's like the day that we live in, right?
And again, some things are kind of cool. Like my partner is back in Seattle, and so I saw this ad on, I think it was Instagram or Facebook. I don't remember. I think it was on Facebook, but it's this little love box, and it's got a little screen in it, and she plugs it in, and it's, I don't know if it's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, or I think it's Wi-Fi, that I have an app on my phone that sends her little messages, and there's a heart on the outside of the box that spins when she gets a message, from me, and she lifts the lid and she can read the message, puts it down, goes away. So it's a neat thing that we've used to kind of stay connected during this 3 months that I'm traveling around the world. And so it's not like everything is bad. It's not like consumerism is horrible.
Right.
I just think that people need to slow down a bit and make better choices. And young people especially, they've got to learn that skill early, because there's just so much that's pointed at them to get them to become consumers so quickly. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is learning to live small and have delayed gratification, because it can open that door, right? Like, I didn't have a retirement fund the first 35 years that I worked. Right? I didn't think I needed it, or wasn't worry about it. But if you can do those things early, then you can have the space later on to be able to say, okay, I'm going to do these things, or even earlier than that, right? You can say, I'm going to take a couple of weeks vacation, and I'm going to go do these things that I want to do. So yeah, I think it's learning delayed gratification and living as small as you possibly can.
Yeah, I love the honesty in that, because consumerism today, one of the first words I thought of as you were talking was, it can be obsessive, because it's everywhere. So not only do you see these commercials on TV, but because we're in the age of social media, it's on TikTok, it's on, all the different platforms. If it's not Facebook, you're on Instagram. If it's not Instagram, it's, tweetering and whatever that people do. So all of that, Elon Musk is going to, whatever, maybe run that. So we'll find out what's going to happen. But it's, keeping up with the Joneses, because they've, acquired this new thing, and all of a sudden now it's, that's a lot of what young people experience. It is the dopamine that is so constant of the next thing and the next thing. And it's there. And remind you, they're not even acquiring the money to get these things independently yet. It's the negotiation skills that they've probably improved tenfold compared to the generations prior to them, because they are working with their parents and grandparents to say, this is the reason why I need, not want, I need this thing. It's going to do X for my life. And if I get this, then that means I can get good grades and do all the things you want me to do. So please just buy me these shoes and jeans and phone case and all of it, Yeah.
I working with high school students for the last 10 years, it just absolutely floored me. I remember being in middle school and my parents not letting me take a comic book that I had to school. Like, don't take your comic book. It cost me 50 cents, right? 45 cents. And it's like, don't take your comic book to school. Something might happen to it. Leave it home. Just leave your stuff at home. And now young people, as early as 12, 13 years old, are walking around with these $1,000, $1,200 devices in their pockets. And there's no appreciation because they didn't have to pay for it. Right? I mean, you just put it on your bill. It just goes along, you don't even see it. It goes on the phone bill and you never have to worry about it. And it's just like, Wow, that's so different from when I was, when I was younger. And I try not to blame them, their generation, the millennials and the Gen Ys or whatever they're calling them. They can't help what the social media companies have designed, right? It's by design to get you to engage in this process, right? It's not a happenstance. It's not a side effect. It is the purpose, right? And so I think there was a time like 2 years ago before the pandemic where Silicon Valley was actively pursuing employees that had been directly involved in the gambling industry in Las Vegas. If you had worked on a slot machine system in Las Vegas, you could get like the highest value job in Silicon Valley because you knew how to get people's dopamine running.
Algorithms.
Yeah, but it's the dopamine, right? I mean, it's like I remember when Facebook changed its notifications so that when you first logged on, when you first opened it up on your phone, there weren't any notifications, and then a couple seconds later, notifications popped up. Right? That's intentional. That's not because the system didn't update quick enough, because it'll update like that. But it's just like they did that so that I would sit there and go, oh, I don't have any notifications. Oh wait, I have notifications.
Your sadness just turned
Right.
into exuberance because
That's
there is
right.
that much that you need to get caught up on.
So it's intentional, right? You can't, if you're using those systems, you can't help it. It's not your fault, right? That's not their generation's fault. It's not like they asked for it. It's what they've been given, and it's what their parents and adults have also allowed them to be able to do. So for me, you just need you can have those things, you can have a phone, you can buy things that are okay, but just have some delayed gratification and try to live as small as possible, for sure.
We're in the FOMO is designed. Fear of missing out is designed. Like, I cannot not click on the red dot and figure out what is happening out there. I remember watching The Social Dilemma when that had come out. I probably like 2 years ago at this point. And it was that whole thing of all of those, the Google, Facebook, all of the big companies, people who work for them, talking about two sides of the coin, the double-edged sword. Because as much as it's the promotion, right? The case that's put out there is, this is about staying connected with the people you love, right? Because what is it? Another baby shower, another wedding. Oh my gosh, look at Suzanne. She just lost 10 pounds. Suzanne, you are lovely. That is awesome. So there is this thing that's like, look at this, it's this wonderful connection, and you can compliment each other on all these accomplishments in life and these milestones. But in the background, while you're doing all this connecting, there's the marketing and the algorithms and the clickbait and the, I've seen you spent an additional 14 seconds on this, which means I know you like this, therefore I'm going to show you this. And it just takes you down this rabbit hole, right?
my favorite story was my dad was in his early 70s, and we're on the phone, and he's trying to cut the cord for his cable company, right? He's finally, not tech savvy, but he's trying to figure it out. And I think we spent like 3 or 4 hours on the phone over the course of a Saturday, trying to figure it out. And we had finally got him to where he knew what he wanted to do. We hung up the phone, and he called me back 20 minutes later, and he's like, "You will not believe this phone call that I just got." He goes, "How does this happen?" He got a phone call from his cable provider saying, "Hey, you're a valued customer, and we want you to stay. So we're going to give you 3 free months of HBO." That wasn't random. As much as people want to think that's random, it's not random. He was searching online. He was looking at things. He was using his phone, and they've got it worked out. They pretty much know everything's going on with you, right? I think that so many times people think that algorithm is this massive thing that takes care of everybody, but they've got it pinpointed to, like, it's you. They know you.
They
exactly
know
what you want. Yeah.
They always know. Just know this. And that's why, and now there's new cultural introductions of the 30-day cleanse from social media, and people are having to come up with ways to stay disconnected so they can get more connected to themselves, interestingly enough. So they're doing the, either I'm not going to go on it, I'm going to disable my account for this long, or I'm going to, do the whole screen time thing and only allow X amount of time because it's just not, useful for me to spend every hour figuring out what's going on Facebook or something.
And I don't want to be that old guy, right? I don't want to be the old guy that's like, get off my lawn type thing. I am amazed, right? When I was a teenager, you couldn't just go someplace on your own and like buy a plane ticket. You couldn't go on your own and reserve a hotel. You had to use a travel agent. There were these things one long time ago called a travel agent, that you would have to call and say, hey, I need a flight. And they would go, okay, where are you going? Where you want to stay? And we recommend these places. Like you couldn't just go on the internet on your own and do the research and figure out where you wanted to go and book flights and Airbnbs and all that stuff. You had to rely on somebody else and their recommendations. And now we have all this information. Like I was telling students all the time, it's like you have every resource imaginable to you to go and do and see whatever you want to. You really do. There are no limitations except money for you to be able to go out and see the world. And the same with communication, right? I mean, we're doing this right now. And
you're in Italy.
And I'm in Italy. That's right. And so, I remember mid 90s, one of my best friends was in the U.S. military and stationed in Germany. And that was like my spending money for like a year and a half was just being able to call him once a month. Like that's like I didn't get to do anything else. Like my wife at the time was just like, yeah, you spent your allowance, because it cost me $60 to $100 to talk to him for an hour on the phone, right? Every once a month. I don't have to worry about that.
That's prioritization right there.
Yeah,
and you're going to take that and use it to actually connect in a meaningful way. Yeah.
But today there are zero limitations for us to be able to do that, right? For me, going on doing the Camino, one of the things I really wanted to try to integrate into my life is expanding my bubble of friends to people around the world, and because there's no excuse that I can't talk and communicate and maintain these relationships because it doesn't cost me technically anything to be able to do that anymore, right? I mean, I think I've seen 16 or 17 Camino friends in the past 2 months since I've been on this trip.
Wow.
And so you can do it. You can maintain those relationships. And I've been communicating with like half a dozen others as well. Just say, hey, what's going on? What's happening? And so there's just no excuse to be able to maintain relationships. So there's really good things about the internet. Along with the bad, there's also really good things. And it's how do you learn how to use those good things? Like one of the things is as someone who attempts to use the internet as far as podcasting and having an Instagram account to support that podcast, it's just like, I know you see this post. Just like it. It's not that big of a deal. That's one of the things that drives me crazy is that why are you holding back pressing the like button? Well, why are you holding it like it's a form of currency or something and people don't want to release it? And that's just all you're doing is letting somebody know, hey, I see you. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Right? Why wouldn't you want to let somebody know, hey, I see you, I see what's going on? It doesn't mean you have to marry the person. It just means that you're saying,
it's acknowledgement.
I see you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who doesn't want that? But yet we just, there's something about doing that people hold on to that like it's like they're not like they don't have an infinite amount.
There's a quota. I can only do this much today. Okay. This is all that I've got 5 of them and I'm giving them out sparingly. But that, that's true. And I, you know, one of the things that I'd like to take away from this conversation is, because you're talking about intentionality, I'm thinking about intentional spontaneity. Intentional spontaneity. So
Mhm.
intentionally going somewhere, or intending for an experience, but having some flexibility and adaptability for that to do more of what the moment calls for. So you do have to book a flight, get to the place. There are some dates
Right.
associated with it. So there is some level of structure, but something that says, I'm going to do a little bit as I go. There's a couple of landmarks. There's a couple of things that, yes, that's on the list. But, in between all of that, I'm just going to be and follow what my heart and my instincts and my gut tells me seems to be a great idea at this time. I think that that is like a cool way for me to think of some of these things where you can have a plan, but there could be some adventure and spontaneity in that plan that doesn't feel so like a job, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it's intentionally holding space for the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the way I would say that. It's you don't know what's going to happen, right? And I was recently a couple weeks ago in Israel, visiting a friend for a couple of days, and he was only available one of the 2 days that I was there. And so I got on the train one day that he was working, and I rode the train from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I walked from the train station down to the Muslim quarter, and I walked around a little bit and, walked back, and I was just open to whatever happened in that space, right? I knew where I was going. I knew what I kind of wanted to see, but I wasn't planning it out minute to minute and holding space for whatever came my way. And one of those things was having lunch in a 100-year-old restaurant, right? This restaurant's been in the Muslim Quarter for 100 years. Same family own it the whole time. And I was able just to sit there outside having this amazing meal and just watching people go by and watching the young Israeli soldiers across the street, holding their post, and seeing young Muslim boys done with school, walking by in their Jordans and their Nirvana t-shirts. I mean, it was just, I got the chance just to really see what was going on. And that is holding that space for the unknown.
Yeah. So much richness can come from that, and it is a little bit of this blend because we're very much taught in the Western world to be planners, and they're like, there's a lot of good in that to not necessarily just blow in the wind and figure out or it's taking you somewhere. But I love the delayed gratification because and I'm fine with dating myself and talking about things like it sounds older because I've come to this recognition that is just part of life, so when I have conversations with people and they don't know what a Walkman is or what a record player is or a boombox or a tape cassette, I'm okay with that. And I will explain to you what my childhood looked like because we had all of those things and you had to wait. I used the payphone. Yes, I did. I didn't have, certain technology as an adolescent. And so you had to wait. You did not text immediately. There wasn't, in a nanosecond, you could tell somebody something. I waited all the way through school periods, which it's the same as it is today, a whole day. Now until like 4 p.m., I could go to the payphone or just wait till I got home to use a landline to do the communicating. So it is different. So, those of us who had to go through these different generations have both of those perspectives of what it was like to have to wait and then now having a different appreciation for the things that come more instantaneously because it is very convenient. You can, if you do want to get your groceries like in a couple hours and you didn't have to go get it. And it makes sense. There's a pandemic. Why wouldn't you want certain things delivered because it's safer or whatever it is? So there's a reason for everything. But I do think that there's just a communication, so we can have an appreciation for all of the good, because everything's a yin and a yang. There's a positive and a negative to everything. And I think as good consumers, as good human beings that want to have the opportunity to, like you're talking about, be global citizens, because I do think that, getting outside of our own box, if you're in another country and your dream is to come visit America, or you're in America and your dream is to go somewhere in Asia or in Europe, it does broaden your perspective culturally around how things are done, how we can communicate. And then we just try to share in some of those universal things like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, or whatever it is, that you could be anywhere and use these different tools. So anyone listening to the conversation, the point is that it's about perspective. It's not
Right.
saying a knock on technology and what it's done for us, or a knock on ambition and trying to be someone that accomplishes things, and maybe it is the mansion and the cars and all these stuff, but it is more so about living life in a way that is integrated and allows you to have experiences and not be just putting in these 80-hour weeks, so that way after 65, hopefully you have enough energy to go and do these things that you've been, dreaming about, because you spent all this time breaking your back working in some sort of job.
Yeah, and the two things I would say to that is, I was talking to a young 19-year-old guy the other day, and he said, "Well, one of the things on my list is I want to own a jet plane." I'm like, "Well, that's cool. Are you going to park it in your driveway and just let people see it as they drive by in your neighborhood, or why do you want that?" And he said, "No, I want to be able to go places and take my friends and my family and go and see things." Okay, great. Then set out your goal and figure out how you're going to achieve it, and call me when you get it, because I'd like to go some places with you. Right. I mean, it's just like, it's okay to have those kind of goals. But it's making sure that the reasoning behind them, right, the intention behind having those goals and those passions and are more than just to have them. I think that's super important.
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree with you. So as somebody who is crossing off your bucket list at this time, what else is there next? So you've gone to Israel, you've been in Italy, you've had these travels, you did the 30, the 4.5 weeks of the tour that you wanted to do. Well, what's some of the next things that are coming up?
Well, I'm currently writing a book. That was one of the things that I wanted to do while I was on this trip. It's why I picked some cities where it wasn't, tons of tourist things to do, so that I could spend some time writing a book. So I've been doing that. Hopefully that'll come out by hopefully July or August of this year. And so I've got that. I recently got knuckle tattoos, crossed that off my list. Coming up, I'm going to be finally crossing off all 50 states. That was something I was going to add to what you were saying earlier, is that, it doesn't have to be this grand, European adventure that like I'm on. The United States is pretty diverse. And if you live in Indiana, it's a lot different in New York than it is, and also in Seattle, as it is in New Orleans or Miami or El Paso or Madison. Our country is like massively diverse, geographically diverse, as well as economically and socioeconomically and cultural diverse as well. But there's a ton of stuff to see in the United States. and the average American only visits like 12 states or something like that. It was, when I heard that statistic, I was like, wow, that's incredible to me, because I got to like 46 without trying. so I mean, intentionally, going to each state. And so I think that we have that space even locally inside the US, where we could say there's a lot of diversity here, and we can widen our bubble by just traveling inside the United States. You don't have to like go all around the world to expand your world perspective. You can do that inside the United States and get just as much of a diverse, maybe not language wise, but diversity as far as culturally. Our country is massively diverse, and I would highly recommend for people just to do that, because it's so, there's so much to see and so much to hear and so much to do inside the states. So I'm looking forward to finally crossing that out. I got 2 more states, and I'll be done. I got Alaska and North Dakota. So I'm looking at crossing those off my list.
They couldn't be the furthest places from each other. That's great.
That's too bad. I live in but yeah, so there's those things. I've got punk rock bowling is on my list. If you're not familiar with punk rock bowling, I'm hopefully going to do that this year. It's a punk rock music festival in Las Vegas that they have every year.
You're coming to my neck of the woods. I'm in Las Vegas. That's awesome. Punk rock bowling. That is really
cool. So it's this music festival, but along with that, it's also a bowling tournament for charity. So you could like wind up playing next to your favorite punk rock musician, and I just want to go play. I've got some friends that have said, yeah, I'll do it. And everyone's like, when they first talk about it, they're like, I'm not very good. I'm like, I'm not good either. I just want to go and play.
Have fun.
Yeah, we're just going to go and have fun, and whatever happens, we're going to get some nice shirts made, and it'll be hysterical. So, those are some of the things that are on my list currently, but I've got a lot of stuff on my list. So I'm just
but you're living it. That's the key.
Yeah.
It's you're living it. It's not this list that you just have to stare at. You actually get to every month do something different.
Well, that's the thing. And that's the thing about the bucket list, is that it's there to be crossed off, right? The items are on your list so that you can cross them off. You wouldn't create a to-do list at work and just let it sit there and not do the things on the to-do list. Bucket list is an
epic failure.
Yeah.
If you didn't cross anything off at work, you wouldn't have a job anymore. So, treat your life the same way you prioritize the things you do at work. Then you're on to something, because then you're prioritizing the things that actually matter to you.
Yeah, and that can bring you joy. I think that's the biggest part of it, is that's what it's about. It's about being joyful, and when you're joyful, then that spreads to other people, and I think that's super important for everyone to not get so caught up in the grind that they can't be joyful, and we need a ton more of that in our world right now. A ton more of joy.
So much. Roger, what's a self-limiting belief that you've had to overcome?
Wow. There could be lots of answers to this question, I think. I think one of the biggest ones was that to travel, especially internationally, like I had to learn languages. I'm never rude, right? But English is spoken a lot of places. I've been to Thailand and never had a problem. I mean, I learned some basic Thai, but it wasn't, like I was fluent anyway. I know some Italian, not a lot. And even when I was in Spain, I learned some because I was there for, a whole month. But I didn't learn a ton. And I think that used to hold me back, that if I was going to go someplace, that I wanted to make sure that I could speak the language. And you learn more of the language by being in it and having to try to figure it out on the fly than you would if you're like, okay, I'm going to use Drops or Duolingo, or, that just doesn't really work for me. So I think that held me back for a long time to travel internationally.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you're braving it out there and helping all of us see though that it's okay to
It
fumble a
is.
little bit. You'll make it through. There's enough
Yeah.
things that you can learn, right?
Yeah. As long as you're polite about it, I think that's
Yeah.
that's the
Don't
biggest
be
part of it.
rude.
Yeah. Don't be a rude American, but
Yeah. People
just be
will
polite. And
give you some grace if you can be kind.
yeah, well, I think the two things I usually wind up saying are, with someone when I'm in another country and somebody apologizes because they can't speak English, I'm like, oh my gosh, don't apologize to me. This is your country. I'm the one that should be apologizing to you. Just kind of being humble about it,
Right. Like,
I think goes a long way. And then the other thing that happens to me, especially when I was in Spain a lot, was that my European friends would like try to explain things to me, like they would Euro-splain things to me, like I didn't,
mm,
just because I was American, I didn't know what things were. And so I wound up always saying, I'm American, I'm not stupid, right? And which they thought was just absolutely hysterical. So, you've got to kind of be humble about it.
yeah. No. I love that. Have some humility and have a sense of humor, but be kind, right? Um, what would you say is one of
Yeah.
your what would you say is one of your superpowers? What's something that you're proud of that you're good at?
Oh, geez. Um, yeah, it's relationship building. And that is a superpower that I inherited from my father. He was always genuine with people, and he listened and was able to use what he heard later with people to make them feel like that they had been heard. And that was, I think, the real essence of his abilities. That if you had talked to my dad once, you could come back 2 months later and he'd be like, how's that thing going for you? I mean, he would just, that memory and just being intentional about listening to people for purpose, not just to listen to them and be like, yeah, sure, yeah, but to really get to know people through listening to them.
Yeah.
But I would really say that's probably, and I definitely inherited it. I did not create it. It did not just happen to me. I watched my dad for 52 years be a super good friend to people. And I always just wanted to emulate that. I was always impressed by it. I have best friends that I've had for almost 37, 38 years. And I have friends that have had less than a year that I talk to 2-3 times a month. So, relationship building is definitely the superhero power I inherited.
Yeah. I wish more people had that. I really do. But that, I will hope for more of that because that is really, at the beginning of this episode, I mentioned that you had experienced difficulties. You had 2 heart attacks. And my question for you was, what makes you unbreakable despite the different challenges and hardships that you've experienced?
I think what makes me unbreakable is that I have gotten rid of negative self-talk.
Mhm.
And it's a daily choice, right? It's a thing that I have to do on a regular basis. And I don't want to say that I'm into like yes culture, like you just say yes to everything,
Mhm.
but I think we have this thing embedded in us where we're kind of taught in our fight and flight methods that to always think the worst or the negative thing first,
Mm.
whether it's about other people or it's about ourselves. Like we think about, oh my gosh, what are the consequences going to be? It's like and I've just decided that I'm not my default is not going to be what's the risk, what's the damage that this could cause, but it's going to be what's the joy that I can get out of this.
Yep.
And so an example of that would be walking along the Camino de Santiago. There's kilometer markers, like every kilometer or so. There's markers that kind of point the way, but also tell you how far you are from completing the walk. And to get a certificate of completion, you have to walk at least 100 kilometers. So the 100-kilometer marker is like the Instagram marker. It's like everybody gets their picture taken there. And I had gotten there late that day, so there was nobody else around, and I was with my partner, and I said, I want to take a naked selfie here. It's a 100-kilometer marker.
Awesome.
And she was like, she knows now enough about, to be like, okay, I'm not going to stop you. You're going to do this, But there's so many things in my head that after I did it and posted it on Instagram, then all the things came flooding in. It's like, oh my gosh, I could lose my job. Students might see this, But my first thoughts were like, this will be funny. I want to do this. I've never seen anybody else do this. This will be funny and cool, and it's something I'll take away and remember that nobody else has. And so I didn't allow myself to be caught up in that, in the why nots, but decided that, for most of my life now, my goal is to say, okay, there's this opportunity in front of me. What joy is that going to bring me?
Yeah.
It's okay to say if there's no joy involved, then chuck it. But at the same time, that's going to be my default. What's the joy I can receive out of this? Whether it's having a relationship, going and visiting someplace, or writing a book, or whatever it is, what's the joy do I receive out of it? And that has helped me get rid of the negative self-talk that I had allowed for so many years to be like, you can't do this, you can't do that. Here are the 15,000 reasons why. So I hope that's what makes me unbreakable.
Oh, yeah. That is huge. Sometimes it does feel like it takes a lifetime to change how you talk to yourself, how you perceive yourself, how you think of yourself. So that's actually quite big. But Roger, what if you had to give a last piece of advice to anyone listening? What would that be?
It's probably just to restate, to find your self-worth outside of how you sell your labor and who you sell it to. I think it's so vital and so important. I heard somebody quote the other day. It said, there's 7 billion people that need to change what success looks like. And I think that's a true statement, but how do you do that for yourself? Right? I mean, change ultimately starts with us as individuals. And so that's what I would suggest people do, is just to find their self-worth outside of, working. There's nothing wrong with working. There's nothing wrong with being a hard worker. There's nothing wrong with being a good employee. But find your ultimate self-worth outside of that time frame. Yeah,
that's big. That's huge. Roger, where can people find you? Where can they follow your adventures and keep up with the book and everything else that's coming?
The best place is Instagram or Facebook. You can find me on Instagram at crosser.offer, and you can find me on Facebook at /crosseroffer. That's where I post about my podcast and pictures and images and stuff about what I'm doing out and what I'm crossing off my list. And then encourage folks, if you're looking for inspiration, I have a podcast called Crossing It Off. And it's all about other people's experiences crossing off items off their list. So I have a new guest every week who has crossed a single item off their list, and we talk about that, how they did that, why they did it, all that kind of stuff, and what it's meant to them to cross that off. It's just super fun, and it's super inspirational. I've had guests that have been on game shows that wanted to be on a game show. I had a guest that's an artist who wanted to raise $1 million through her artwork. I had a woman over 60 that wanted to learn tap dance. So it's all across the board, and it's a great way to be inspired. If you're looking to do one of the things that a guest has done, it's a great place to get information, but at the same time, it's also just encouragement to listen to other people and how they've lived in their lives to cross items off their list.
Oh, that is stellar. That is really awesome. You've been such an inspiration. I'm grateful for taking the time when you could be doing something out there in Italy. You had this conversation with me. So, I'm looking forward to seeing the next set of things that you do. I think it's
Thanks.
amazing. And I really do think that you're helping so many of us that have tuned in to, think differently and to put ourselves first. So this has been awesome.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's the key right there. You said it.
Roger Williams. That was one of the dopest episodes. Oh my gosh. How inspired are you to cross things off your bucket list? But not even wait. What can you do? This is my ask of you today. What can you do that is on your bucket list that you can accomplish in the next 90 days? Next 90 days. Is it money that you have to save? Is it time that you need to take off? Is it planning for a trip or an experience? Take action on that. He is living proof. Obviously, he did it in his own way after just a little bit after 50 years old and some different experiences and epiphanies that pushed him to take this adult gap year. I love the title of that. And he's right. That is not uncommon in certain cultures or times in life. And I don't think it needs to be associated with one specific thing. If you have the means and the ability to do that, sooner rather than later, why not? Why not take the time to do that? That is incredible. Incredible. That would be my first ask. My big takeaway is his great point about delayed gratification. The fact that it may take a little bit of time and it may take a little bit of planning, but you can execute on things that you want in life. It doesn't have to be this minute, and it doesn't have to be outside of your means. There are far too many times when people are maxing out credit cards, doing something to keep up with someone else or a group of people to prove that you're capable of purchasing something or experiencing something at the sacrifice of your debt. You don't have to do that. You can do things on your own terms and at your own pace within reason and still have incredible experiences. Just know that. Make life about you. Make it about getting better every day for you, the people that you love, the people that are immediately around you. So cool. Definitely follow Roger. You can check the show notes for where to find him. Become a crosser offer yourself. We all have it in us to do a little bit better at that. Remember that you are your only limit and take action today. Happy spring. I really do hope that you're getting out there into more adventure now that the weather is starting to change depending on the part of the world you're in. It may still be a little cold and rainy and things like that, but don't let that stop you. We are living life today. We can make choices today to get up, get out, do something good, do something fun. So make it happen. Make it happen. And I will see you next time on another inspiring episode of the Born Unbreakable podcast. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and review.